Oy vey. How's everybody doing? Hanging in there? Remember, if you feel like sleeping, remember that rule? Good. Remember the schmear rule? Okay, so my work here is done. Sleeping during a rabbi's sermon I consider holy, and I worry about the sleep debt in America. So if my voice helps you to take a nap, get a few sleep, I feel like that's holy and very important to me. So whatever you need to do, relax into this. I want to tell two short stories to describe a little bit of what has got me to this moment in some profound ways. In 1984, I applied to rabbinical school. There were no out rabbinical students. There were no out rabbis that had a job in America. The one out rabbi left her congregation and moved to teach in a rabbinical school because she knew had she stayed in the job, she couldn't have continued. And I started rabbinical school in that climate. And then the next year, word of mouth went around to the closeted, very hidden LGBTQ, of course, we just said lesbian and gay then, rabbinical and cantorial students and education students and rabbis and cantors. Those of us who were very, very, very hidden, that we wanted to have a gathering. Debbie Friedman was the organizer of that gathering, and her partner at the time, Rabbi Drashah. And what they did, we all knew each other, but it was unseen and invisible to the larger world, of course. And we were given the phone number to call when we arrived at the airport of a certain city, which we weren't ever supposed to disclose. This was, of course, before cell phones. So we arrived in the airport, we found a payphone, we called that number, and we were told where to go. And when we arrived at this totally hidden conference center, kind of guest house conference center, only then did we know who else was there. People were so anxious about being there, we weren't even allowed to have a sheet of paper with the name of the conference. Not that it was that formal, but to say who was there with the names of the participants. And we had to commit to that in order to be present, that we would not put anything in writing that could trace anyone who was there to the fact that they were at this particular gathering. That was 1985, it was over 1985-86 New Year's period. Most of the people in that room went on to do work like I did. They understood the radical truth that in isolation, it's impossible to organize for change. That being isolated means it's impossible to have the courage or the wherewithal or the inspiration to do the work that's necessary to change. But bringing 30 of us together in that room is really the foundation for the transformation of the Jewish community. The people in that room went on to do the change that has resulted in where we are today. That is extraordinary. That generation is my generation and is now retiring or died. We lost many people because of AIDS, and we now need to look to this younger generation, which you saw on the bima in the faces of the children of CBST who are now adults, in the faces of the interns at CBST, in the faces of the younger clergy at CBST. The world is an extraordinary place. So hold that story for now in a bucket. Second story. When we moved into the church, and Bill Hibsher is here, will remember that very well. We moved into the church on 28th Street, and Bill always said there was beautiful poetry to it because it was in that church that CBST began in 1973. But when we outgrew the Bethune, outgrew is the wrong word, when we something that space, we couldn't really fit, and there were a lot of mice and a lot of cockroaches, let's be honest. We shared that space with a lot of wildlife. Many stories there, but That's for the book I'll write that'll be the shadow book to Rabbi Cohen's book, which is the entirely celebratory story of CBST, as opposed to the story when one of our executive directors was sitting at her desk in Bethune Street in one of the cubicles that we had, and one of the drop ceiling panels, you remember those ugly, ugly drop ceiling panels, fell on her, and 100 cockroaches fell from the ceiling onto her in the desk. That's when I said, we need to find a different space. It took us a while from there. I loved Bethune Street. There was so much holiness there. We did so many important, beautiful things, but there were more of that wildlife than there were of us, let's just say. Anyway, we moved to the church. Remember, that was controversial. But the vestry of the church was very dedicated to making us feel really welcome. We put up a mezuzah. They were careful on Christmas season to have limited iconography and no crosses that would be visible. They were very eager for us to feel welcome. The first Friday night we were there, which was during the Christmas season, that first year, I don't know who remembers this, we walked into the sanctuary of the church, and there was a Christmas tree on the bima. It hadn't occurred to them that a Christmas tree might pose some issues for a Jewish community trying to have Shabbat services. They got rid of all the crosses. They had John the Baptist, the baptismal, remember that? We turned it into our kippah holding, what's the word? Basin, right. The font, the baptismal font was our kippah holding thing. We covered it. But they hadn't occurred to them that a tree might be difficult for us. So the next week I spoke to the priest of the church and I said, maybe there's something we could do. We certainly don't want to supplant. You're a church, you have services. It's where the great soup kitchen, and it means a lot to the people of the soup kitchen. Maybe we could, on Friday nights, cover the tree. Like, let's get a beautiful blanket or a beautiful sheet or something. Would you be willing? I was very tentative, but the priest was so upset to understand that we were upset. Not upset that I was bringing it up. He said, let me get back to you. He spoke to the vestry of the church, called me, the vestry is like the board of directors, called me the next day and said the vestry was horrified that we would feel that Christianity was trying to push us out of our Shabbat experience. And not only would they not cover the tree, they would get rid of the tree, because the spirit of Christmas was more about making us feel welcome than whether or not there was a Christmas tree in the church. And I believe all of the years, and Bill, I think we were there 18 years or something at the church, there was never a Christmas tree at the Church of the Holy Apostles for the entire time we were there. Those two stories teach me so much about the values that our community embodies in ways that are so significant. First, in isolation, it's pretty hard to figure out how to change the world. It doesn't happen in this American concept of individuals are the only thing that matters. That great man in history thing is nonsense. The idea that there's going to be a single person, it doesn't apply to me. It doesn't apply to you. Any success we have had as a community, any advancements we've made, any work we've accomplished is because we've done it in community. We're able to lean on each other, get creative with each other, yell at each other, be mad at each other, and ultimately, with the tension that exists in community, we're able to create and transform the world. Most synagogues in America today are not actually communities. And that is one of the great challenges that we as a Jewish community have. And we must protect that at CBST as a priority. And the second is what that church did for us. We must always think about radical welcome, not just, superficial, you're welcome. They were horrified to hear that they hadn't thought of that themselves, but they were very eager to absorb it and do something. And as a result, we had a deep relationship with that church for those 18 years. Many of our members volunteered in the soup kitchen. We taught classes back and forth. I was very close to the priests there, and even on June 3rd, one of the priests from those years, and she is not at that church for many, many years, came to the June 3rd event. Relationships matter. On Yom Kippur, some of you might remember I talked about this period of time as Bein Hashmashot, as the magical, mystical time that our tradition describes between the 6 days of creation and the 7th day of Shabbat, the twilight time, the time in between. And we're told in Pirkei Avot that in that twilight time between the creation story of the 6 days of the week and Shabbat, God created a bunch of things. One of the things that God created in this period of Bein Hashmashot was the Keshet, the rainbow. And there's commentary that talks about the things that were created then were kind of planted to be discovered in generations to come exactly when we would need it. Different than things that were created for use at the time. When I was installed on September 11th, 1992, it was a huge honor for me that Rabbi Alexander Schindler did my installation. He got a lot of grief for it because CBST is not a Reform synagogue. He was the head of the Reform movement and maybe the most prominent American liberal Jew in the period of his leadership. He was a genius, a brilliant orator, a great leader. And because I had worked in the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism for 2 years before, and because Alexander Schindler was so dedicated to AIDS work and to LGBT rights when no one else in the straight Jewish world was, Alexander Schindler was. He was the voice of standing up in the straight Jewish world for the gay Jewish world. And there were very, very, very few voices. He was one of them. And in fact, to honor him, Zichrono Livracha, he's no longer with us, we have in our CBST Sidur, in the section on gay pride, from his writing about what it means to be a straight ally for the gay community. And how honored I was that Rabbi Rick Jacobs, who is in the same role that Alexander Schindler was when I was installed, that Rabbi Rick Jacobs came on June 3rd, as did Jonah Pesner, who's the head of the Religious Action Center, where I worked for 2 years before coming here. Unfortunately, David Saperstein had COVID like everybody else, so he couldn't be there. I want to read tonight some words that Alexander Schindler said at my installation. I read it recently through. It's an incredible speech, but I can only tonight do little bits of it. And so I'm just reading very small pieces, which tears my heart out, but it's worth just you hearing his voice a little bit at this moment. After he spoke about me and spoke about CBST, who was at that installation in 1992? Let's see, we have a lot of, wow. So Rabbi Schindler said, "We have a perfect match here, an ideal bond, uniting as it does an unusual rabbi with a unique congregation. All we need do is to express the prayerful hope that the beautiful promise of this installation will indeed be fulfilled during the months and the years ahead. And if my installation message must have its cohortative aspects, then let it be this. Let the congregation value its admirably gifted new rabbi, ever drawing from her that which she is capable of giving. And may you, Sharon, together with those you love, give your utmost to this holy congregation, knowing with full assurance that they will respond to the best whenever the best is given and demanded." He went on, "It is in the hope that we will enable us to fulfill this twofold mandate that we will now offer to Sharon Kleinbaum our blessings and our prayers. We call on God to bless you, Sharon, as our teachers once blessed us and their teachers once blessed them. For you and we and they are linked in an unbroken chain from Sinai until now. Know then with what we charge you to go forth into the world, to sing the Jewish song of centuries and tell the endless tale of an endless people called to service. Assume your new tasks then, and raise up students in Torah, the Torah that is God's blueprint for creation, that someday, you may know the joy that we do as we give you our blessing. Rabbi Schindler's blessing that I received that day has nourished me every day since that day. And he and Irving Cooperberg stood with me in front of the ark and gave me the priestly blessing. Neither of them are alive. I've carried their blessing, and please God, I've been a teacher to students here, and now you carry Rabbi Schindler's blessing. Words that I wrote in 1999 on the 7th year of my being rabbi here at CBST, the 25th anniversary of CBST. I believe in cosmic influences. I believe that we influence the cosmos, that we influence the world. I believe that what you do, what I do, matters. Our lives, our actions, our words, even our thoughts can make a difference. I believe that we are all here, every single one of us, for the sake of what we can do together. Together, we can change the world. I did not become a rabbi in order to become a salesman for Judaism. I became a rabbi because I believe in the meaning and power of prayer and the presence of God in our lives. I did not become a rabbi in order to become a politician or a social worker. I became a rabbi because I believe in the power of religious community to overcome the culture of despair, devoid of meaning and values in which we find ourselves. A year ago, meaning 1998, CBST celebrated its 25th anniversary. Recently, somebody asked me what I thought I would see on our 50th anniversary, which we just concluded, by the way. And I have to admit, I had to stop and think about it. What took me by surprise and made me stop and think was that the first thing that came to my mind was what I didn't see. I didn't see a building, although we desperately need one, and I hope and pray we have one soon. And those hopes and prayers actually came true. I didn't see a staff of assistant rabbis, teachers, social workers, administrators, and office assistants, although we need all of them, and we have them now. I didn't see a grand piano, although I dream of the day when our music program will have a grand piano, and we have none now. I didn't see the 1.5 million Jews living in the greater metropolitan New York area. Who can imagine 1.5 million people, or even the many among them who are lesbian or gay or bisexual and transgender, and who may still unable to go where they can go and be both gay and Jewish together. What I do see are children and teenagers and young adults and not so young adults and parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews and cousins and friends and lovers. What I see is a CBST in which all of these ages, all of these relationships, among them lesbian and gay Jews, are natural and worthy as life itself. I see a Hebrew CBST with a Hebrew school. Is it possible? Can we imagine it? We have one now. I see a CBST equipped to offer the fullest range of pastoral services to meet the needs of our community. I see a CBST to have our own cemetery, which we have now. I see a CBST that tracks the whole greater New York metropolitan area to the Jewish Learning Center that invites Jewish scholars of the highest caliber all over the world to pursue their specialties now as scholar in residences. We have a scholar in residence now. I see a CBST with ties to hundreds of American synagogues, Jewish institutions and communities, prisons and senior centers as a result of the ongoing and expanding rabbinic internship program. I see a CBST that is full of the arts that celebrate our lives. I see a CBST that is an intellectual force to be reckoned with the Jewish world at large, and that is a leader in the movement to bring the theology of community, our community, from the margins of society toward the center of our national and international religious life. I see a CBST and a world whose children's children may never know what it is to be rejected for who we are. We are an unaffiliated, non-denominational synagogue for lesbian and gay, bisexual, transgender, and straight Jews. That is where we began, and that is who we are. And that is and must always be the cornerstone of our work. The spirit of CBST attracts straight people and non-Jewish people to our congregation. We welcome everyone the same way we welcome everyone else. Whatever your sexual orientation, whatever your relationship to Judaism, whatever your gender identity, you are welcome in this community. In the same spirit, we also welcome visitors from the many innovative congregations all over the world who come to us to take a look and bring back to their communities from our teachings. Some are gay, some are straight, some are Jewish, some are from other faith traditions. They come not because or not only because we are LGBTQ and Jewish, but because we have become. We have become. For them, a working model for the entire Jewish world of what can be achieved socially, politically, spiritually, through religious community. For in a larger sense, the issues of our lives as LGBTQ Jews only experience a little more acutely than other people, and into which we thereby might gain a little special insight. This insight is not only a gift, but an obligation. Evan Masu Habonim Haitala Rosh Pinah, said the psalmist. The stone that the builders rejected has been the cornerstone. In Parshat Shalach, in which we read this week, Moshe sends into the land spies, meraglim, to report back. 12 go in, 10 come back and say, we have seen giants in the land. The obstacles we are facing are too big. The realistic obstacles to us are way beyond what we can handle. Lo nuchal, we are not able. They listed absolutely in realistic terms the obstacles that were facing them in the future. They ticked down the list. They didn't make anything up, and they didn't exaggerate. They were describing the reality of a future that is fearful and terrifying. All the people we saw when we were there, they said, are giants. And we looked like grasshoppers to ourselves, so that's how we must look like to them. Lo nuchal, we can't do it. 2 of those meraglim came back, famously, of course, Caleb and Joshua, and said, yeah, it's really scary, and yes, there are giants there. But no, we only look like grasshoppers to ourselves if we think we're too small. If we think we don't have the ability to overcome the obstacles, if we think that the obstacles are too big and we give up because it's too scary. We hear or we see something that terrifies us and we say, we will, lo nuchal, we can't do it. We have to give up. Don't even try. 2 of the 12, it's a minority position, said, don't give up. Don't give in. It is only because we believe we can do something will we be able to do it. It doesn't mean we will all survive. It means we could face a fearful future and still do what has to be done. Rabbi Salanter, who started the Musar movement, said the key thing every person must hold on to and keep 3 precious qualities in order to lead and live a life with courage. Don't despair. Don't get angry, and don't expect to finish the task. Liminal. On Yom Kippur, I talked about this year being extremely a liminal time for us as a community, But that liminal time, the Bein Hashmashot, doesn't end now. We are still and will be for a long time in a liminal time in this community for sure. The world outside is a terrifying place right now. The list of things that could and probably will go wrong, very long, very scary. There are a lot of giants out there who want to kill us. But as Joshua and Caleb said, if we don't think of ourselves as grasshoppers, they will not see us as grasshoppers. So it is up to us how we embrace the future, both internally to this community and externally in a terrifying world that waits outside these doors of this sacred community. It is up to us to decide, will we give in or give up and be the generation that generations ahead will look back and say, what? How could you have just stopped caring? How could you have turned off your basic humanity to Palestinians who are suffering right now? How could you turn off your suffering, your passion, your compassion for Israeli Jews who are suffering right now? How could you turn off your compassion for immigrants on the border right now? How can you turn off your compassion to those within our community who are broken or suffering? You can say to me, but oy vey, how can we possibly be so open to all of the pain in the world? And that is exactly where the power of community comes in. No one can do everything, and everyone can do something. And we must create beauty in the world as much as fighting ugliness. We must create music and art and celebrate great picnics in the park. We must remember that we have to feed our souls with that which makes life worth living. It's not a joke to say, if I can't dance, I don't want your revolution. I mean it. And no, I'm not Emma Goldman, but I believe it. We have to be the ones that create the model for both creating beauty and joy and satisfaction and contentment. And understand that when you're in a community, there are others that are going to be able to fight in a given day, and then there's going to become a day that they need to rest. Or the singing of the chorus will give us nourishment so that somebody else can go out and go to a demonstration or write a petition. And all of us, of course, must vote. We are in these tremendously scary times, but we've been through a lot together. In these 32 years, we've gone through AIDS. We've gone through the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. We've gone through multiple wars in Gaza. We've gone through tragedy of COVID and living in this ground zero. And we've gone through a politics, which it was Masha Gessen who said to me, maybe in 2016, the fascists have the imagination. The problem is we don't. And their imagination of what can be gets them there. We have to have an imagination of what will create the world of justice and of beauty, of art and of love and of compassion for each other. Please pray for me. I will be praying for each of you. Shabbat Shalom.